The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you compliments of KFC. It's finger licking good. With the news, I am Ruth Wilson. Good evening. First, the highlights. The People's National Congress Reform wants government to abandon plans to build a natural gas pipeline and instead ship the fuel. A Bishop's High School teacher has been freed of sex charges. In the region, Israel accused Iran on Tuesday of planning to arm drones supplied to Venezuela with precision-guided munitions. And Barbados is digitizing its national identification cards. Details of these and other stories, including the international news from the BBC, in a moment.
After a hard day's work, a lime at the workplace would be great, and even greater and better with KFC, with a wide choice of finger-licking meals in a wide range of sizes. Could be a birthday celebration or promotion, or a lime for no reason at all. Any lime, anytime, anywhere is better and tastier with a delicious meal from any of KFC's 9 locations, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence, open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
And now for the news in detail. The People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, on Tuesday argued against the government building a more than $1 billion natural gas pipeline. The more than 200-kilometer pipeline, which will be financed by ExxonMobil from Cost Oil, will take natural gas from the Liza well to a gas-powered electricity plant to be built by the government at Wales, West Bank, Demerara. PNCR Central Executive Member, retired Rear Admiral Gary Beth, says broadly that shipping the gas will be better.
In particular, the use of ISO containers to ferry liquefied natural gas to shore is a much less expensive and more environmentally friendly transportation method. We are advised that LNG ISO tank containers are seen in the industry as the easiest and most flexible means of conveyance to transport gases. Apart from the massive cost savings relative to gas pipelines, the LNG tank container option would allow the country to export excess gas to several overseas markets. Clearly, this is a better option since such export is not possible in the pipeline project.
He declines to provide technical details to justify his party's preference for shipping. Instead, he wants the Bipartisan Parliamentary Committee on Natural Resources to discuss the various choices.
I don't think this is the forum to provide technical details. What I can say to you that we do have our experts and we're willing to sit and discuss those details with the government. Secondly, there are a number of institutions and organizations that also have information in relation to not only oil and gas and natural resource, but many issues that afflict the nation. So it is important for the PPP to utilize the democratic mechanisms within the Constitution, within the Parliament. There is a parliamentary sectoral committee on the natural resource. Therefore, we call on the government to use that committee, bring the public and other experts to give evidence and information concerning the oil and gas, natural resource, and also a pipeline.
Guyana, Suriname, and Brazil have been in talks about the construction of a natural gas pipeline to send gas to a huge electricity generation plant in Brazil. Known as the Acro Norte project, it has been studied by the Inter-American Development Bank. Thousands more water users across Guyana's coast will have to pay rates by meter. The Guyana Water Incorporated, GWI, says it will be installing 20,000 meters during this year with the aim of increasing metering to 85%. The utility company says this is the continuation of a robust metering program which saw over 15,000 meters being installed in 2021. That included the replacement of close to 5,000 non-functional or faulty meters. Based on 2019 data, only 53% of consumers along the coast have water meters. Among the areas to be metered during this year in Region 2 are Anna Regina, Cottonfield, Lima, Mainstay, Reliance, and Walton Hall. In Region 3, the metering schedule includes Anna Catharina, Den Amstel, Cornelia Ida, Good Fortune, Port Rhine, and Versailles. On the east bank of Demerara, Eccles, Farm, Great Diamond, and Little Diamond, and on the east coast of Demerara, Better Hope, Industry, Luzignan, Ogle, and Happy Acres. The Georgetown metering schedule includes Kitty, Lamaha Gardens, Queenstown, South Rheinfeld Gardens, and Bel Air Gardens. In Region 6, metering will be done in areas which will include Williamsburg, Rosehalltown, Nig, and Port Morant, while in Region 10, metering will be carried out in Amelia's Ward, Linden, among other areas. Metered GWI customers are billed based on the amount of water consumed, and this allows them to manage their consumption to avoid a higher reading. Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony says mental pressures associated with the COVID-19 pandemic appear to be easing. He made the observation during his latest COVID-19 update.
I think at the beginning, when people were locked away because of the curfew and there was a lot of restrictions of movement, I think at that point in time, people found it more challenging. Now that the society is more open up, I don't think people are so confined. And some of the challenges and anxieties that people might have had in the early part of the pandemic, that has eased somewhat.
The health minister says that a fair number of persons are being affected by the long-term effects of COVID infection.
So we've seen a subset of patients who would have fatigue, who would have things like brain fog. They don't remember in the midst of a conversation, they forget things. And that's partly due to inflammation of the brain. So this is something that we have to pay attention to, and that's why the unit that we have set up to deal with long COVID would be assessing these types of patients.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony. Bishop's High School teacher Cohen Jackson was Tuesday found not guilty of one count of sexual activity with a child under 18 years old by abusing a position of trust. Attorney at law Nigel Hughes says the jury was unable to arrive at a verdict on the remaining 3 counts on the same charge. Mr. Hughes also says that in the remaining 3 counts, the verdict was 9 not guilty. Mr. Jackson was represented by Savannah Barnwell, Jerome Kahn, and Nigel Hughes. Back in 2018, the Magistrates Court had found that there had been sufficient evidence for Mr. Jackson to be trialed by a judge and jury. He had been accused of committing the offense between December 2010 and May 2011 at Durban Street Lodge on a female who is now 26 years old. The man who was arrested allegedly attempting to leave Guyana for the United States with cocaine in fried rice has pleaded not guilty. The Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit says that 28-year-old Esmond Jermaine Anderson was remanded to prison until March 8. Kanu says he was held with 6 pounds of cocaine in frozen fried rice minutes before he was due to leave on a JetBlue flight for New York last Friday. His lawyer told Magistrate Judy Latchman that someone at the airport put the cocaine in his unlocked suitcase. Mr. Anderson was employed in Guyana by a leading oil sector support company, and he earned more than $200,000 per month as a warehouse specialist. Head of Kanu, James Singh, says the arrest of Anderson with drugs is a lesson to young people not to be tempted to get rich quickly. A taxi driver of Tushen, East Bank, Essequibo, was last night stabbed several times and robbed by 2 men who pretended to be passengers. A woman with a baby also boarded the car at Tushen and asked to be taken to Crane Housing Scheme, West Coast, Demerara. The taxi driver, 26-year-old Insaf Zakir, called Gaddafi, told police that they all escaped on foot after the robbery. Mr. Zakir says the man who was seated behind him grabbed him by his neck and demanded that he hand over his valuables. The taxi driver says that as he resisted, the same man stabbed him several times to his chest. He also told police that the other man then relieved him of his Samsung Galaxy A20 cell phone valued $48,000. Mrs. Akir is hospitalized in a stable condition. checks were made for the perpetrators, but they were not found. You're with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. It is 18 hours 10. We now turn to news in the region. Israel accused Iran on Tuesday of planning to arm drones supplied to Venezuela with precision-guided munitions. Reuters news agency says the remarks appeared aimed at raising American alarm as world powers try to conclude a new nuclear deal with Tehran. Venezuela said in 2012 that Iran was helping it build drones for self-defense. The two countries, both OPEC members and long at loggerheads with Washington, also cooperate on oil exports. Briefing U.S. Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz showed photographs of what he described as an Iranian Mohajer UAV, meaning unmanned aerial vehicle, in Venezuela. Iran denies supplying military drones to any of its allies and has denied seeking nuclear arms or supporting terrorism. Venezuela's information ministry did not immediately reply to an email seeking comment on Gantz's remarks. Israel supported the 2018 withdrawal of the United States from the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, and with Washington now taking part in negotiations to revive the pact, has urged caution. Barbados is rolling out new digital identification cards. The announcement comes as a Barbados licensing authority is to undergo urgent reform and a private company is to be hired to deal with the backlog of driver's licenses. The Barbados government says that the new digital cards will also replace driver's license. Details from Barbados Today.
Barbadians will soon have their new digital national Trident identification cards. Word of this from Minister of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, Davidson Ishmael, one Monday announced that the new cards will be rolled out in the coming months. The new digital ID cards will replace the current laminated identification cards and also driver's licenses. In addition, persons can also opt to have their fingerprints and medical information embedded in the new cards.
This new Trident ID card will be launched during this first quarter of 2022. And I can assure the House through you, Mr. Speaker, that this project is at an extremely advanced stage of its development. And we are confident that, barring no unforeseen circumstances, that we shall be well able to deliver this exciting new Trident ID card in the coming months. Most of the technical work, Mr. Speaker, has been completed, and my technical team is currently in the phase of beta testing all of the technical aspects of the solution to ensure that we have compliance with international data security standards. And Mr. Speaker, may I assure this House and the people of Barbados by extension and through you that we are checking every detail connected with this card.
That was the Minister of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, Davidson Ishmael, ending that report from Barbados Today. Trinidad and Tobago is depending on natural gas to rebuild its economy as well as other economies. We get more from TTT News Online.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says natural gas will provide the energy needed to assist in rebuilding economies as the world emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic. The Prime Minister's statement came during his address at the 6th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum in Doha on Tuesday. Dr. Rowley said as a country impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, Trinidad and Tobago can identify with the theme for this year's summit, championing natural gas post-COVID-19 recovery and sustainable development.
Pre-COVID-19, the domestic energy sector, based on the government strategies, was enjoying a major upturn. The pandemic curtailed this momentum by delaying the implementation of new upstream projects.
Prime Minister Rowley said the pandemic affected this momentum by delaying the implementation of new upstream projects. He added, however, that recovery is on track.
In the medium to long term, Several gas projects are in the appraisal and sanctioning phases. These include deepwater projects with estimated gas reserves of 6.6 trillion cubic feet and the Manatee cross-border field, which adjoins the Venezuelan Loran field.
The Prime Minister and a delegation which included Energy Minister Stuart Young left for Qatar last Friday for the 6th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. The summit began on February 20 and ended Tuesday.
Now in Antigua, the St. John's Magistrates Court has granted bail to a woman believed to have made COVID-19 vaccination cards for her own financial benefit. Antigua Observer reports that Jamisha Millwood was charged with 21 counts of forgery for allegedly forging 21 of the vaccination cards last year. She made her first appearance before Chief Magistrate Joan Walsh, represented by attorney Lawrence Daniels, and was granted bail in the sum of $1,850 with a $925 cash component. She also has to report to a police station 3 days each week, provide 2 local sureties, and surrender all of her travel documents. The nurse allegedly charged over $370 per card when she allegedly committed the offense at the Multipurpose Cultural Center on November 13, 2021. The 29-year-old mother of 2 was said to be an employee of the Sir Leicester Bird Medical Center and was a volunteer at vaccination stations. The Health Minister, Sir Molwen Joseph, disclosed in November last year that the woman had been relieved of her duties until the matter has been resolved. The defendant is set to make her second appearance for her committal hearing on March 17th. At 18 hours 17, we now turn to international news from the BBC.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. President Biden has announced US sanctions on Russia, which he said went far beyond those imposed after the annexation of Crimea. He said President Putin was establishing a rationale to take more Ukrainian territory. Mr. Biden announced moves to block trade involving 2 large Russian banks and stop Russia from raising money from the West or trade debt in its financial systems.
We've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either. Starting tomorrow and continuing in the days ahead, we'll also impose sanctions on Russia's elites and their family members. They share in the corrupt gains of the Kremlin policies and should share in the pain as well.
President Biden also said he would continue to provide Ukraine with what he called defensive assistance. The head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, says there's evidence Russian troops are moving into separatist-held areas of eastern Ukraine. Russia's upper house of parliament has approved a request by President Putin to use troops abroad. Mr. Putin said he recognised the borders of the breakaway Donetsk and Luhansk regions as outlined in their constitutions, which includes territory under Ukrainian government control. He also called on Ukraine to be completely demilitarised and to give up its ambition to join NATO. Caroline Davis reports.
A day after Russia recognised 2 Moscow-backed separatist-held areas in eastern Ukraine, its parliament has approved the use of the army outside of Russia's boundaries. President Putin said on Monday that troops would be sent to both regions. He said that they'd be used for peacekeeping, which the US described as nonsense. The voting was broadcast live on Russian state TV. Of the 153 Russian senators who took part, none voted against or abstained.
A jury in the United States has found 3 white men who murdered a black jogger guilty of federal hate crimes. The 3 defendants had already been sentenced to life in prison last year for killing Ahmaud Arbery. Aleem Makboul reports.
For the second time, a predominantly white jury in the southern state of Georgia has unanimously convicted 3 white men who killed a black jogger there. In November, it was at the murder trial where prosecutors laid out how a father and son, Travis and Greg McMichael, and a neighbour, Roddy Bryan, chased down, ambushed and shot dead Ahmaud Arbery, later claiming they thought he'd committed a crime. Now it's at a separate hate crimes trial, where the jury decided the men had attacked and killed a 25-year-old because of his race, with evidence presented they'd exhibited a history of racism in the past.
BBC News. An Israeli court has suspended the planned eviction of a Palestinian family in East Jerusalem's Flashpoint neighbourhood of Sheikh Jarrah. The Salem family had been ordered to surrender the property to Jewish settlers who'd claimed ownership of it. Jerusalem Magistrates Court has agreed to freeze the eviction until it's ruled on an appeal by the family. Palestinian health officials say a 14-year-old boy's been shot dead in the occupied West Bank by Israeli forces. They say the incident happened near Bethlehem in the town of Al-Hada. The Israeli military said the Palestinian boy, Mohammed Shahada, had thrown a petrol bomb before being shot by soldiers. All 7.5 million residents of Hong Kong are to undergo 3 rounds of compulsory testing for COVID as mainland Chinese officials increase their involvement in the antivirus operation. Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam said those who refused would be punished. Gary Brooker, the lead singer of the English rock band Procol Harum, has died at the age of 76. A statement by the band said the singer, composer and pianist had died peacefully at his home on Saturday after a battle with cancer. He co-wrote and sang the song A Whiter Shade of Pale. David Silito reports.
May 1967, and the hit song of what would become known as the Summer of Love was from a newly formed group called Procol Harum, fronted by singer Gary Brooker. Born in London, he'd started performing in the early 60s, but everything took off when he formed Procol Harum. When they split in the 70s, he performed with a number of other artists, including Eric Clapton, before reforming the band that had created one of the defining songs of the 60s.
Turn the whiter shade of pale.
That's the latest world news from the BBC.
And that's the news to the moment.
After a hard day's work, delicious comfort food is all we crave for. There at KFC, they've got you covered with a wide choice of delicious, finger-licking good meals from any of their 9 locations, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence. And there are 6 drive-through locations for your convenience. Their 11 herbs and spices are sure to blow those post-work vibes away every time. It's the perfect way to end a hard day. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
To end the news, here's a recap of the highlights. The People's National Congress Reform wants government to abandon plans to build a natural gas pipeline and instead ship the fuel. A Bishop's High School teacher has been freed of sex charges. In the region, Israel accused Iran on Tuesday of planning to arm drones supplied to Venezuela with precision-guided munitions. And Barbados is digitizing its national identification cards. The news came to you compliments of KFC. It's finger-licking good.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.